Well, I mean, again, maybe this could be the theme of the show. It's not about what it's about, right? People are just pretending that that's what it's about. So if you say to somebody that, government schools are, bad or destructive and so on, right? Then what do you think they might be getting out of that that's not an abstract? Right. Yeah, I mean, so the things that pop into my mind, right? So if I heard this and I was your average statist, then a whole bunch of things would pop into my mind. First of all, I would say, oh, so you're basically saying I can't think. I don't know how to think because I went to government schools. And so you're saying I've been indoctrinated. I don't know what the hell's going on. So I'd be upset and offended at that because you see, offense is so much easier than thinking, right? So if people can get offended, that they don't have to analyze anything, they don't have to review anything, they don't have to look at any facts. They can just substitute offense for argument. It's an ad hominem against the argument itself. It just allows people to avoid. And so if people get offended when you say that state schooling is indoctrination, that actually confirms the thesis because offense is what you are trained into when you're indoctrinated. You're trained to be angry, offended, and upset by particular questions or perspectives. And that is a complete example of indoctrination. So people who will get offended by that are only confirming the diagnosis of indoctrination. So that would be one. The second thing would be, okay, so my parents put me into these terrible schools and praised them the whole time, and my aunt is a teacher, and you saying that these people are all somehow enmeshed in some monstrous plan to indoctrinate children for the sake of our reptilian lizard masters or something, and so they'd feel bad about that. And of course, if they themselves have children, then they've put those children into these government schools. They feel bad about that because if they accept your argument, what are they going to do? Well, they have to pull their kids out of government schools, or they have to start teaching them about some actual truths in the world, which is going to cause them to run into lots of conflicts with their teachers and perhaps their children with other people's children, and so on. And so they just kind of want to dodge and avoid that. And of course, government schools are daycares. I mean, they're prisons in a way, and they're daycares in a way, because it allows, I mean, obviously inconveniently, but it allows parents to drop their kids off and then go to work where they can pay taxes and feed the beast called the state. And so people have structured their lives around, well, my kids go to school. And then there's a daycare tacked onto the end of the school day, so I'll drop them off at 7:30 in the morning, and I'll pick them up at 6:30 at night. And that's the way I've structured my life. And I bought a house and have a mortgage payment and a car payment based upon all that kind of crap. And so if you're telling me that I'm actually doing harm by my children to put them in daycare, to put them in government schools, then I'm going to have to change my life significantly, and that's going to bring me into conflict with other people. So I'm going to sit there and have to go to my aunt, and my aunt's going to say, "Oh, I hear that." My aunt, who's the teacher, is going to say, "Oh, I hear you pulled your kids out of school. Why is that? Have you become some fundamentalist Christian? And is it too secular for you?" You'd be like, "No, it's because it's funded on coercion and based on indoctrination." What are you saying? Says your auntie. Are you saying that I have somehow been doing harm to these wonderful children who I love so much and would lay down my life for to educate them properly and bring them up as wise, caring, virtuous citizens? Yes, exactly. I mean, this is the Thanksgiving dinners that you can look forward to if you accept this argument. And your children, of course, are you're going to have to say to your kids, listen, we're pulling you out of school. Why are you pulling us out of school? Well, it turns out it's an indoctrination farm. Oh, really? I quite like it there. My friends are all there. I don't want to leave. Blah, right? So you got to quit your job. You got to move out of your house. You got to go from two cars down to one car. You got endless conflicts with your family, and your kids don't want to be pulled out of school because that's all they've known. Plus, you have to apologize them for the harm that the school has done to their brains, which you've supported before. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So you stack all of that stuff up against. That's what people hear, and that's what the dominoes that go off in their brain when they hear government schools are bad. It is a complete reorganization of their life. And the most terrifying thing, I argue, the most terrifying thing that they're going to experience is they're going to experience the degree to which their relationships are based upon intolerance. Intolerance. I think that I'm pretty open-minded. I've certainly had people on my show and on the message boards and all over the place who come up with some arguments that I find pretty appalling. But, I mean, offense is not the answer to a bad argument. Offense is a confession of an incapacity to deal with a bad argument. It is throwing your sword off a cliff and thinking you've won the duel. But the degree to so if you think for yourself You actually have an identity. You have a soul. Your soul is sparked by original thought, by your relationship with the evidence and your capacity and willingness to use reason. That is what is called the personality. Everything else is just the emptiness of cultural bigotry that masquerades as a personality. So you have authenticity, you have uniqueness, you have a self when you think for yourself. And so if people say that they love you, then they must love something that is particular to you, not just the cultural habits that were indoctrinated or inculcated into you when you were a child. And so the most terrifying thing that people are going to experience is when they say, you know what, I've just started thinking for myself, and this is what I think. Are people going to say, wow, that's great. We've been waiting for you to do that because, you were kind of a boring cultural stereotype before, and now you're actually thinking for yourself. That's wonderful. How can we help? Of course not, because if those people were around, they would have encouraged you to think for yourself years and years ago. And so the truth is that people like you when you have the depth and richness of a child's puzzle piece that can be fit into any convenient shape that they want. That's what people like, for the most part. And so when you start to think for yourself and you get some sort of depth and you get some sort of identity and you get some sort of authenticity and you actually become someone rather than repeating the dead echoes of dead others, well, how many people are going to be enthralled, enthusiastic, happy, and encouraged by your individuation, by you thinking for yourself, by you challenging the dead, rolling thunderball of anemic and rotted culture? They're not going to be very happy at that at all. And so they're basically going to start putting pressure on you to get back into the box, into the child's jigsaw box, into what is ever convenient for other people and not threaten any of their hidebound preconceptions as well. And I say this with a lot of sympathy because, people all gone through this kind of indoctrination for the most part. And so they're going to look at their relationships. They're going to say, okay, well, if I start thinking for myself, who's going to love me? Fundamental question. If I start thinking for myself, who the hell is going to love me? And that is a terrifying question for people. On two levels. One, of course, is that they may recognize or realize how few people will actually love them for thinking for themselves. But most importantly, if you even ask yourself that question, you've actually answered the question of how many people love you now. And that's not a pretty answer for most people.